Thanks to Laura Carpenter for providing today's hashtag Acumatica TNT. The issue has to do with sorting a report in Report Designer on an attribute. Now Laura's doing this on a vendor, but I was able to have the same problem on an item. So let's take a look. I built a simple sample report that shows just a list of items. I filtered it just to show items starting with food to keep the list small. And I put in a custom attribute that I called priority. So if I take this item here and we go take a look at stock items, I'll pull up this item and you can see the attribute here. There's an attribute called priority and the priority is 2. So my super simple, kind of ugly looking report example is showing us the list of items and also their priorities with the attribute. Now right now this is not sorted. This is just the default sort in the database. So of course we can come into Report Designer. You'll see there's the 2 fields right there. You'll see here's the filter looking for items, the food items. And we can come in, and because I'm in the detail section, so first thing to be aware of is if you have grouping, the grouping will take priority for the sorting. But in this case, we're just dealing with the sorting area right here, which applies to the detail section only. So my super simple report, there's no grouping, just detail section. If we go into sorting, I can add a sort, and maybe let's add in the item, and let's do the item ID. So that would be inventory CD. Click OK, we'll save that. And let's rerun this. So we had 2, 1, 3, 6, 4, 5. Let's refresh that and run it. You'll see it's a little bit different. The 2 and the 1 were next to each other. There's a little more spacing. So it is actually sorting on the item ID now, whereas before it was the default sort, which is probably the order that the items were created. So that's great. I can sort it by the item. But now what if I want to sort it on the priority? So here's where the trouble is. If I come back in and I look at the priority field, well, I'm picking it up from the inventory item and the priority attribute. Now, quick note, if I had created this report and then I go later add the attribute, like for example, let's come in here. If we look at the items in here, I can see down here that I've got priority attribute. Now, if I had created this report before adding the priority attribute, this would not be available. And you could make it available by loading the schema up here and then clicking on inventory item, then clicking refresh. That will refresh the fields that are available for the inventory item. As soon as you click that button, it's now looking what's in your Acumatica environment, and it would pick up that priority attribute if you had just created it. So I've already done that, and I'm printing it here. Now let's say I want to sort by that priority attribute. So we go to the sort, we click here, and let's change this to that priority attribute. So down here, priority attributes, click OK, and we'll save that. Then we'll go back and run the report, and I'm expecting to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but it doesn't look like we have anything. We're actually back to the way things were originally. So it basically is completely ignoring that sort. And if I go back in here and I remove the sort, actually I won't do that yet. Let me show you something. So back on the report, we look at the trace. Looks like we don't get a trace on this, so that's not helpful. But if I go back and I remove this, so 2, 1, 3, 6, 4, 5 with 3 on the bottom, 4 in the middle, 2, 1, 3, 6, 4, 5, 3 on the bottom, 4 in the middle, nothing changes. So if I put a sort on the attribute or no sort, it looks exactly the same. So for some reason, it's completely ignoring the sort. And I think the reason is Acumatica has to go through some steps to get this priority attribute. It goes through those steps behind the scenes. It's able to do that for you to get the value, but it's not able to do that for you if you want to use it in a sort. That'd be nice if you got a warning, but it's not smart enough to give you a warning. So let's look at how we can do a sort on this attribute. If I go back up here, I've already added this table, but attribute values are stored in the CS answers table. So if I go to the relations tab, I'm going to join from the inventory item to CS answers. And I'm going to join first on the note ID field. For some strange reason in CS answers, there is a note ID field, but you don't use note ID, you use ref note ID. And then I'm going to hard code in the attribute ID to be priority. Now I'm able to do that if I click in here and I click on the parent formula, then I can type a formula, equal sign with single quotes, priority. Why priority? Because that is the, let's show you which ID that is. That is the ID here. So this ID, not this description, these could be different. That's the ID that I put here. So we're joining based on these two fields, note ID to ref note ID, priority to attribute ID. And if you had multiple attributes, you could like type in an alias, like maybe we could say this is the priority, and then you could join to CS answers again and give it a different alias for another attribute. And so you could join to CS answers multiple times. I only have it once, so I'm not doing an alias, but you would do an alias here if you had multiple. So after I've done that, now I can go get the same value but in a different way. So let's add this onto the screen, and value is where the attribute value is stored. So now I'm dropping two different fields on here. They both should return the same value. Let's take a look at that. Let's rerun that. Yep, same value. So the same priority values. I just did the work in the second column to go get the information through the join rather than Acumatica doing it for me. So what's the whole reason for doing it that way? Now I can actually use this value in the sort. So let's go back to the sort. Let's add that field. Actually, you know what? I'm going to choose it this way. CS answers value. Okay. Save it. Run it. And you'll see now it's sorting by the priority. So you have to make sure you're using the CS answers value, not the attribute that Acumatica makes available to you on the inventory item, the vendor, or wherever that attribute is stored.